All right, welcome. So I'm Dean Korsak. I am the Chief Legal Officer at the Air Force Research Lab Information Directorate. So we are the lead for DoD on quantum research. And then within the Air Force, we just figure out what's possible. And then once we know what's possible, we mature the technology and apply it to problems that exist that we care about and field it, and hopefully other people take it over and maintain it. Sometimes that happens. So we're gathered here today, I'm supposed to say that, to formalize this occasion to talk about blockchain and Bitcoin and all of that stuff that happens. And I've got a few disclaimers. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. I am not endorsing any non-federal entity, and I am also not sharing any official positions of the United States government, Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, Department of Justice, or any other federal entity. Okay. But I can put a plug in for this wonderful place we're gathered in, the Innovare Advancement Center and the Griffiths Institute that runs it. And so if you're here or in virtual land and you like technology and you think the government may have an interest in what you're working on, the Griffiths Institute exists to kind of help you interact with the big scary federal government. And so reach out to them. They've got an incubator going. They've got the Hustle. That's a new program to help folks get off the ground and running. Summer faculty, STEM students. So anyone in that category, get online, check them out. Okay, there's the disclaimers and the plug. And so now this topic that came up and came into the lab, hey, do you have anyone that can talk about blockchain? Why would a lawyer be the person talking about this technology? Because that seems a little weird. And it's because it's software. That's all it is. It's not even new software. Blockchain's been around quite a while, but now it's the application of that software and society's interest in it, and then the government's interest in it that has created regulatory disparity, a lack of regulation, national security issues, because some rogue elements that we may categorize as our opponents are using it in ways we're not comfortable with. And so there's a whole lot of national security, legal, regulatory issues. And then when it comes down to the general population, wow, I've got a slide. Every legal issue you could think of, from litigation, judgments, how do you enforce a judgment, marriage, divorce, death, estates, cryptocurrencies, virtual assets are impacted. And there's not really a great regulatory framework yet that aligns and is consistent. And so that's kind of why the lawyers are getting more involved, that understand the technology side and all the regulatory issues that come with it. So hopefully that makes sense. And just about any of our software folks could write a blockchain in about 200 lines of code. You know, it's just not that difficult to do. So let me tell you a story about the future. And this will explain where some in society think blockchain and virtual currencies are going to get us. You want to buy a house. And so you enter the metaverse. And you can immersively, so it's better than virtual reality, you can immersively go across the country and even go into a house, see it, the layout, walk the property line. You can walk down the street. You can do it any time of day. There's an array of sensors, optical, heat, moisture, whatever sensor we need. You can turn all the hot water on in the house and have a drone pick up the sensors instead of the heat sensors, or the draft coming in to get a sense of the quality of the house. So maybe you don't need to pay for a home inspection every time. There's a group of investors instead of banks that have pooled their resources, and they use a smart contract for whoever wants to buy a house with that pool of assets. And there's risk factors based on Oracle data feeds on credit scores, other factors through AI and machine learning that we know people are likely to stay in a home a while, pay off a house, be responsible individuals, maintain the house, and all those things. There's an insurance pool. And so you don't have to deal with an insurance company because that's built into the contract with the risk factors. And so all that stuff's done. You didn't have to apply to a bank. You didn't have to wait. You find a house and you want to buy it. And instead of waiting 60 days to go to the closing and for someone to do the title research, because the county that maintains the land rolls has blockchain that technology. And so it's instantaneous when all the smart contract elements are met that the transaction, the final button gets hit, and now you have a new owner. And you didn't need a title search. You didn't need to pay for title insurance. And so in the matter of probably what takes 60 to 90 days now, and somewhere in the ballpark of $8,000 to $12,000, you're going to be able to do in 3 days for a couple $100. That's it, folks. Thanks for coming. There are a lot of blockbuster type enterprises out there that are still renting equivalent of VHS and cassette tapes, and they have no idea Netflix is coming. All right, so that's why this topic matters. So the background. Has anyone signed? Come on, there we go. Has anyone digitally signed an email using, like SHA-256 encryption? Of course you have. Everyone uses that. And so that's the same thing here. It's the public key infrastructure that generates a hash, an encrypted hash of a private key and a public key. So we already use this. And so now we're applying it to a specific transaction instead of an email. It's something else, and it's just not financial. And so what would that look like? So for the computer scientists out there, I put in my notes, yes, it's a ledger, a digital ledger, just like a bank has ledgers. This is email transactions. That's like a form of a ledger, but not big categories of assets, same technology. And so all we're doing is using a linked list, which just takes the public key, matches it with the private key, and then the person with the private key can go access that asset. So that's a digital transfer is what's happening. So the technology is not new. In fact, it's probably old, and not much. If it's more than 10 years old, which it is, it's not new. It's just the way it's being applied. And so here's some of the ways that it's different than a digital signed email. So I mentioned, 200 lines of code. I think that's the shortest code that I've seen for complete blockchain. The layers here, so you have the blockchain, and then you have things built on the blockchain. And that's what kind of makes Bitcoin different from some of the other blockchains like Ethereum. And it's the enablement of smart contracts. So Bitcoin is more like digital gold to people, a store of value, but not great for transacting because it is the proof of work. It's that linked list, which is an inefficient software processing method. And it has to go through the history of the transactions and figure out what's the longest, most reliable sequence of transactions. And that's the one we trust. And that's the authentic transaction on the block. So it's building the blocks. Now, take it a step further. Instead of the United States government using an internal blockchain, which we do for certain things, enterprise use, internal use. What makes blockchain fascinating now is this decentralized distributed ledger framework. And so you can use any computing device. Like there was one company that, I downloaded their app and it was using my excess computing power on my cell phone to process their transactions, and then they'd give me a little bit of it. And so I mined some of that cryptocurrency. So you could do that, but now think about all of the devices and all of the excess computing power that exists. And you start to see this framework, this web of interconnected devices, and you don't have to trust these people. It's trusted data from untrusted sources because you have that hashed, encrypted, secure transaction. So pretty fascinating. But now you get into how is this going to be governed? And so we had a little pre-presentation discussion on proof of work. So that's the typical Bitcoin model where people have their computers running and the longest transaction is the most trusted, like a chain of custody, which lawyers also care about, and why this stuff makes sense to us because it's basic evidentiary issues. Chain of custody, validation, secure storage. And so proof of work is kind of how it started when you look at the original Bitcoin paper that someone, we don't know who, and it was not AFRLRI. We are not Satoshi Nakamoto, okay? I checked, that's why I wanted this assignment. So I was like, hey, who's got the private keys to the secret stash of Bitcoin? Come on. No one had it. Because we don't care about money, we're the government. We just spend it, we don't care about making it, all right? So proof of stake is a more efficient way to process these transactions. Well, the problem is the original idea behind Bitcoin was secure peer-to-peer money transactions. Well, anyone can set up a node and use your computing power to do it. Linked list, inefficient. So now we go to some protocols. Proof of stake, which means not the kind you eat. You own a chunk of this digital currency. And so that increases people's trust that you're going to have a trusted network and process, and you can do it a little more efficiently. But you give up some of that original decentralization, the public empowerment. And so that's part of the tension in some of the communities and the companies that are doing these things. Now, take it a step further. Peer-to-peer financial transactions. So originally, I'm supposed to be able to pick up my phone and say, hey, I want to buy something out of a vending machine or a bottle of water from the kitchen. And I go bleep, and it buys it, done. That was the original intent, folks, okay? We're a little far from that. Centralized exchanges exist now. So instead of using, so these things down here in the bottom left or your bottom right, the MetaMask wallet, the ledger, the Trezor, those are all pieces of hardware that store the digital currencies, and how you get people that mined something before it had any real value and they lost it in the trash bin and now it's in a landfill and they want to go find their $200 million of digital assets. And so that's also one of those practical issues with this. So centralized exchanges store it all for you, but do you really own it? What if you're Canadian and you wanted to support a particular effort, not committing much crime, blocking a freeway, and the government seizes all of your assets and just sends an email to centralized exchange and they're like, hey, this wallet address, shut it down. And so again, you're losing some of the original intent behind decentralized processing, ownership. And so it's a balance. Do I risk my phone breaking, losing my private keys, my seed phrases? What happens when life takes its course and I make the earth a little warmer, 6 feet under? Does someone know how to access this stuff? You can't break the encryption. Like maybe our quantum team can in 20 years, probably not, but we'll use it for other ways. But they're not going to be using it to break encryption to get lost digital assets. So that's a problem. So if that's a concern for you and you trust the government, then go put it on a centralized exchange and hope it doesn't get hacked. Okay, I think that's enough on that topic. So a lot of issues there. The one that you should walk away from with this slide is public availability of transaction history. So right now, any one of us in this room have enough background education and experience to figure out how to, you can download the complete history of Bitcoin transactions and then link the wallet addresses that have transacted. You can do that. And then for the investigative side, not just criminal, but civil, asset location, freezing, estate transactions, who owns what. So if you can link an identity to a digital wallet address, then you can start to map it out just like you would with, traditional investigative tradecraft, phone numbers, emails, bank accounts. It's the same thing that applies, but since this is publicly available, I don't need a subpoena to get the wallet address transactions. It's a big deal. So I think it's, we'll get to it. Well, you know what? Let's just get to it right now. Criminal. There will be less violent crime with digital currencies because no one's going to stick me up for my wallet. They can't access it, or they're not even going to know where to start. There's no physical cash to steal. There's no suitcases of money to go give someone to commit fraud or espionage. Well, we have other issues. How do I link an identity to that wallet address that someone just got paid to engage in corporate espionage? And so we've got to get smarter on that. Did they use a centralized exchange, share that information? But by and large, illicit transactions, laundering operations, they're a little easier for law enforcement to track because you have the public availability of the digital addresses. It's just linking that identity. Yep. And on that note, all of the issues related to transactions. So think of all the laws that apply that we interact with every day on the left-hand side here. And there's the back end, the Bank Secrecy Act, the Wire Fraud Act, all that stuff, but then the normal day-to-day stuff that we interact with. The ownership, who owns something, whoever has the private keys to access the digital currency in the wallet, that's kind of it right now. Is Bitcoin or any other virtual currencies a security or property under the law? Stay tuned. There is not a regulation on that, and there's about a dozen different agencies that are looking into it. And so the Air Force looked at this issue a couple of years ago when COVID hit, and I was helping the Education and Training Command figure out, the decision was made, don't shut down basic military training, push 150,000 plus students through all of the training pipelines and do it in a safe way. We could have just shut down, but we kind of like challenges, and COVID was great for the military because we had to figure it out. So we really learned a lot. And so one of the protocols I came across, I was looking at patent stuff at the time, and there was a blockchain company that had a patent, a US issued patent, which was unique because that means they really believed in this and cared about it for probably at least 3 years, and they secured a patent. Can blockchain make that process more efficient? My goodness, I wish it could. So this company got a patent for what's called proof of view videos. So we're thinking like, hey, we got all these trainees in the dorms. We have some software we use, but we don't want to be invasive and monitor them with a camera, but we want to make sure they're going through their coursework. And we can't actively monitor. There's not enough people to do that. So in an efficient way. And so there's this protocol out there, proof of view, and it can tell us in the stack if someone viewed certain videos. That's it. So we reach out and say, hey, we might be interested in doing business with you. I'm conducting market research. Tell us a little bit about the company. Well, I think they were issuing a security and they didn't register it. So I don't think we do business with companies that issue a non-registered security. And so we didn't move forward with that company. Great protocol. I think there's still an interest there, but the regulatory framework has to get ironed out before the government could engage with a contractor. And we'd have to be able to say that they complied with the SEC requirements to issue a security in the hope of a return, you know. So it was disappointing. Taxes, so capital gains, is it property? Is it treated like a house? Is it treated like stock? So that's a little easier to deal with right now. The conversion of assets, at what point do you get taxed? You know, so if I have a bar of gold and I give it to someone for a car, is that a taxable transaction? So all of those same issues exist depending on whether you're trading stock or a bar of gold for something else and at what point. So there's not the level of clarity, regulatory clarity for large companies to go all in on this, you know, and maybe it'll never get there. I don't know. Know your customer laws. So the banking laws. Imagine that I am like a decentralized exchange, you know, and we all came in this room today and we're using the Griffiths Institute's flea market. It's kind of what I envision the Innovare Advancement Center as, a flea market where we exchange information. Who tracks all those transactions in a flea market? Anybody? If I own a flea market, I don't care. Like, you paid me my fee, use the place, transact freely, and then leave and clean up your mess behind you. And so the know your customer requirements are not really a great fit for flea markets or decentralized exchanges, because I didn't gather the information if I got paid on the front end. I really don't care who you are. I just have you agree not to sell anything illegally. And so the regulatory framework is not a great fit for decentralized or peer-to-peer transactions right now. And you know, that tax man, he can come around if your kid's selling lemonade and probably have a legal basis to tax them. And so some of that's happening in the crypto space as well. All those issues, the normal domestic relations issues, collateral bailment, all those legal issues. If a court signs an order and says, go seize these assets because, you know, someone got in a car wreck and you're liable, and your home is homestead exempt, and so we're going after your bank account, but you gave it all to Binance, and so, or you have it in a digital wallet, how do you enforce a court order with that? Not really clear right now. So those are some of the risks with accepting digital currencies, especially if you're an organization. Who did it come from? You know, organizations care about that. You know, if I shouldn't use this example. I'm going to use this example. Okay. So some organizations don't like other types of organizations. And so, like, if you're a small Southern Baptist church, you don't want to accept Budweiser donations, just because that came up in a conversation one day. All right. And then there's other organizations that care about where the money's coming from. And so, you may not know, if you put your label out there, you put your public key address out there on your website, say, please send us Bitcoin. Well, now you're going to get a whole bunch of mess about, you don't care about the environment. Even, I'm not sure. We'll cover that in a little bit. And you don't know where this money came from. It could be a terrorist. And then someone like me, you know, been deployed overseas. We don't domestically produce aviation fuel and ship it abroad, so we locally procure it. Who are we paying? Where does that money go? The Qatari government. All of it? The Saudi Arabian government. Really? What if there was a way to have some transparency with these transactions? That's the type of stuff that is interesting to the military, you know? So all of these issues, financial disclosure is a big deal. So we talked about some of the uses, that little loop, that's the proof of you, you know, the video. Credit card transactions. So I was a small business owner in the past. It was horrible, did not make enough money for the headache, and it wasn't fun. And so you have to batch credit card transactions and pay way more than you'd have to pay for a crypto transaction fee. 100% guarantee, I know it from personal experience. And so that's a direct use case for every business out there right now, is to reduce transaction cost and speed it. And then I mentioned the Russian aviation firm that tokenized, and that's a term in the last slide, the tokenization of anything in the metaverse that you want to buy is basically linking an item. So if I want to sell you my boots, you know, on the new version of Craigslist or eBay that transacts in the metaverse, or a hamburger, you know, McDonald's is getting into the metaverse, you'll see, virtual restaurants. Then it's going to be tokenized, and I'm going to pay in cryptocurrency. I'm never going to have to wait in a checkout line again, because the sensors will know what's in my bucket, or I'll scan it with my phone. Sam's Club is already doing that. And then I walk out of the store and everything's paid for. So I don't have to wait 90 days to close on a house. I don't have to pay $8,500 to close on a house. I don't have to stand in line at Sam's Club or BJ's or Costco or wherever you shop if they adopt this technology. This sounds pretty cool. What about vehicles? So just like you tokenize a deed on paper in a courthouse that could flood or burn down or get forged, I can tokenize anything, any big piece of property with title. There's a company working on that right now, VINs. And so who owns the VIN? It's whoever name is on that piece of paper. Well, what if instead of the piece of paper, the public safety for the department or the motor vehicle department for a state just adopted, implemented a blockchain to have a secure transaction history? So that's the type of stuff that's been going on, especially in the judiciary. The judicial branch has been doing this for a while with authentication of evidence, documents, chain of custody, metadata. Who was sent that email and at what time? The CEO knew about that unsafe condition and let that happen anyway and killed 30 employees? There it is. And so this is easy for us to digest. What I'm not sure about is the bottom right, the voting. And so blockchain would be a great tool to use for voting, for governance. It could be internal. It could be given to military members based on performance. We care about time and grade, and sometimes that hurts us because all the young innovative folks don't have authority to do anything. And all the people in the Pentagon they're like, blockchain, what? Blocks you play with in the living room? Like, they'll tell you that. It's a speed issue. And so, except General Pringle, she's up to speed on all this stuff and she can do anything because she's my commander. Governance, voting. What if you applied it to real voting, like actual voting in elections? So you have increased transparency. You have assigned, instead of a wallet address, you know, the token, you're approved to vote. You can easily audit it very efficiently, like phenomenally efficiently. There will be no ballot counting, there'll be nothing. The audit aspect is very impressive. And so I will do whatever the government says its policy is, but this is something that hasn't been fully analyzed and vetted, and it has huge potential if we care about election security, huge. Because it's not going to be a public blockchain like the financial aspect of this software. It's going to be internal state, the Secretary of State's control the voting mechanisms in each state. So really interesting applications. Okay, here we are. So we talked about criminal. It makes, so I said reduced violent crime, that's something that can be reasonably anticipated with switching to secure financial transactions, not cash. Ransomware is easier because it has global reach. So it's pretty easy to inject some malware, get someone to click on a nasty link, hold data hostage, and then say, instead of a suitcase full of cash, or, you know, back in the day, get me a bag full of diamonds, it's going to be, give me some Bitcoin, send it to this address. And so now there's an incentive for these ransomware transactions that most companies and organizations who care about it, it's the industrial control systems where the big vulnerability, the utilities, the water, electric, databases, a lot of ways to get to shut down a system, even kinetic impact. So some of the Department of Energy and DoD tests were, you know, the ransomware attacks, you can send a pulse to a generator and get a physical impact from that. And so all of those industries, cyber security has become more important. And so the ransomware is probably going to be, they'll be less vulnerable, and they'll have a protocol in place to try to prevent, mitigate, and reconstitute operations when they're hit. You know, it's probably not if they're going to get hit, it's probably when they're going to get hit. And we're no different, you know. I don't think Bitcoin, it's kind of like a vehicle. I don't think you could stop using or try to outlaw, don't know if you could, Bitcoin. It's the same thing as like saying, well, terrorists use Toyota pickup trucks, and so we're going to ban Toyota pickup trucks. Come on. And so when you hear these talking points, you have to think like, let's apply it to some other context. Is that even reasonable to think that way? You know, it's probably not reasonable to think we're going to ban cryptocurrencies and somehow ransomware is going to go away. No way. It's crazy. So let's talk about the environment. So there is the process, environmental impact analysis process and cumulative effects. And so I started, this does not exist right now, and the government doesn't pay me to write it, or else I would. This analysis does not yet exist with mass adoption for cryptocurrencies. So I just started poking around. How much of the physical currency in the United States exists compared to just on a digital ledger? It's about 8%. So 8% of all US currency exists in dollar or coin form. So we're kind of already using digital US dollars, only there's a bunch of middle people in the middle in the transaction framework called the banking system. And so there are policy concerns about whether that's going to be a mass adoption. They're going to do it internally to decrease transaction cost. They're really not structured and incentivized to decrease transaction costs. And that matters because, you know, if I was advising the banks, I'd say, well, you have a legal obligation to your shareholders on pretty much a 2-year outlook to be profitable and disclose some of the risks and vulnerabilities with your plan. So environmental impact is becoming more important to every institution. And so the talking point to the folks that have something to lose by mass adoption of digital currencies is, well, it's bad for the environment. You shouldn't accept it. No one's ever done the analysis. How can you say that? And so what if you did not mine and refine and transport and store and transport again, and then destroy all of the 8% of the US currency that exists? What's that carbon value compared to the dual use computing power that already exists because we're using it for our phones and computers, but now we can also perform a little transaction with it? No one's done that analysis yet. And just based on the environmental projects I've been involved in and some of the initial data I've reviewed, I feel like the conclusion would be, yeah, this digital currency thing may be more efficient, especially if the ones that use the proof of work and involve more computing power are not used for financial transactions on a daily basis, but more for the store of value. So if you wouldn't move around an armored truck full of gold bars, then you wouldn't very frequently move around the equivalent value in Bitcoin. You would just buy it and store it as a store of value. That right there would bring down some of the environmental impacts. And then some of the more efficient blockchains that are used for the daily transactions, yeah, you're not going to have the same environmental impacts that you have right now. So it's out there, yet to be resolved, a lot of work to do, and I don't get paid to do it, so have fun. Call me if you're in academia and you're working on this. I'll help you. All right. So this is the last slide, and then we'll go into Q&A. With regulation of innovation. Oh my goodness, this is a frustrating topic. What's that on the right-hand side? Come on, engineers. This is like Pictionary. What am I getting at here? 5G. So you got a relatively old in the modern world technology on aircraft, and then you have this spectrum with all the frequencies that the Federal Communication Commission auctioned off in blocks. And you have 5G for expanded use because everyone wants to transact. Wonderful. They didn't deconflict. So like counter drone ops, we deconflict spectrum all the time. That was an easy fix. That's not even a regulation issue. That's just people failing to coordinate, and it's kind of embarrassing, all right, to be honest with you. They should have called us, we could help. Let's go to your left-hand side. Anyone know what that is? That frame there? Okay, there's a couple companies out there doing this, but it's a three-wheeled vehicle. So two in the front, one in the back, fully enclosed. That particular one is the Elio. I don't own any Elio stock. I'm not sure you'll ever be able to buy an Elio. I don't know, we'll see. What was so fascinating from a regulatory innovation perspective with the Elio is that company did a lot of heavy lifting on the different regulations. You have regulations for a motorcycle, and you have regulations for an automobile. Ooh, there's no regulation on this. And so do you have to wear a helmet inside of this fully enclosed vehicle with airbags and a seatbelt that meets all of NHTSA's safety standards? You just might have to. And so they created or helped some of the state legislatures create an auto cycle category. Okay, but this is where we're at with, the digital currencies. Is it security? Is it property? Is it used? Does the Bank Secrecy Act apply? Is it FinCEN? Do they have jurisdiction over it? And so this is the same thing. We're kind of in the auto cycle framework with digital assets right now. Why this matters, why it matters to the military is, what's that in the middle? The telephone. Show of hands. Who uses one of them? What? You people, you must live in Clinton, New York. And it came with the house that was built in the 1890s, that I had to buy one too, because there's nothing new. Happy to be there. Okay, so take all the developing nations. Are they going to use that? Are they going to invest in a landline network? No, they're leapfrogging technology. And so all of the developing world, which this is hard sometimes for Americans to grasp, you all, congratulations, are in the top 5% of wealthy people in the world, and the top 5% of wealthy people who have ever lived on planet Earth. And most of the world does not live as well as we do. And so as those nations develop, as those continents develop, they're going to start moving quicker than we are. We've got legacy technology. We have moats, legislative lobbying moats built around legacy technology. One of them was the incandescent light bulb, and the effort to keep that final incandescent light bulb plant open that was, maybe a little cheaper on the front end, but a lot more expensive to operate over the life cycle. It burned out in a year. I can get an LED for maybe double the cost, but it lasts 10 times the amount of time. What are we doing here, folks? And so you have this leapfrogging concern where other nations, and I'll apply that to the financial transactions. What if the US dollar loses dominance? Now we have some concerns. We lose our national supremacy, our influence, our incentives, our sanctions ability. And so this is getting real serious as nations start looking for better, more efficient, fairer, equitable options to transact. Wow. Hold on. Couple that with, so I wrote a paper some years back on the potential for nations who are at risk of climate change impacts, whether you believe that or not. Some nations are seeing sea level rise, abnormal temperature and cold weather spikes, some real impacts. Their survival's at risk. What if they start developing a consortium? What if they start developing supremacy over a region? We have new competition now. You see where I'm going with this? It's a big deal. So financial transactions are one of the key ways that nations could leapfrog and not go with a default fiat currency or be obligated under another nation's fiat currency. It's a big deal, and it's just starting to develop. So that is my presentation. Oh, one last thing. In the US, how do we view money? Very important, right? More than other countries. We view it as speech, according to the Citizens United Supreme Court decision from 2010 that some lawyers still read and like, I know what they said, but I'm not sure how they got there. And so is the US that we place this high value on money and expenditure and sometimes anonymity. Now we're going to regulate money. I think it's a lot more difficult to do in this country because of the litigation history and the constitutional protection that money and expenditure has here. So that's another difference where other nations, it may help us, it may hurt us. It depends on the makeup of the Supreme Court, to be honest with you. And who knows what that's going to look like in 15 years. So with that, the world is getting better. I will remind you, and I will open it up for questions and answers. And I will start with thank you for whoever gave me this one. So I think we covered the nonprofit donation risk, where it's coming from, also the transitory, the fluctuations in value. And so if you accept Bitcoin, is it going up or down? It depends when you want to use it. It is just the reality of it. They're kind of like pot stocks right now. When everyone thought marijuana was, some states started to legalize it, although it's still illegal under the Controlled Substances Act. Again, regulatory disparity that we will see with Bitcoin. The fluctuation in value is just unpredictable if you're going to use it to transact. So if you're going to get it as a store of value for an endowment long-term, things could work out fine, but it's just too uncertain right now for people to be comfortable. It's better to have it than not have it, so that there's the one thing, but you don't want to take the place of the actual donations you're getting that you can use and have predictable value even in accounting for inflation. So the criminal side, we covered that pretty well. It's not the criminal side that the United States government is primarily concerned about. It's the counterintelligence and the counter-terrorism side where money can flow easier and sanctions can be circumvented. So that's primarily what the military's interest in digital currencies are. But the US Department of Defense's recently issued digital modernization strategy has said, and they are correct, the promise to provide increased effectiveness, efficiency, and security of digital assets is something that we are really interested in, but it'll be the internal use cases. So it kind of insulates us from all that, the concerns. And I think we covered the environment pretty well. The other thing I'll add with the environment is you can tokenize emissions. So a ton of carbon emissions. And so it's a better accounting mechanism coming out of a smokestack. You know, so I think blockchain can help with accounting. And then lost energy. So El Salvador, they're using volcanoes. You can use some of that lost energy that you couldn't use for local transactions for the network to power the network. Natural gas flaring is another one. Lost energy. You could put a mining machine on top of it or get the heat from it and power a mining machine. Pretty easy. So I think it has more potential than has been recognized in the national dialogue. So we've got some questions coming in online. Oh boy, are there any US Air Force entities that are currently using cryptocurrency? Yes, we actually have 22 vetted projects, and a number of them made it through a phase 1 SBIR a year or two ago. And so it'll be internal applications. We do have publicly available contracts that have been awarded. I think it's Simba Chain's the company. And so they've got a couple agencies that have contracted with them. But again, it's not like we're asking for Ethereum or we're going to use it to transact. We're building this stuff internally because of the value. So I wouldn't say we are using blockchain, but I wouldn't say we're using cryptocurrency because we only use US dollars. So yes on blockchain, no on cryptocurrency. Final answer. What else? Yes, sir.
Keeping the power grid, regulated. And then also the post-quantum cryptography. I mean, NIST is writing the standard like right now. But although the threat might be 20 years out, what is the risk of needing to upgrade the entire blockchain infrastructure instantly? Is that going to be possible to address quantum resistant cryptography in the future?
Yep. So the quantum's the easy one. It could get there, but so like Coinbase's securities filing, you can read in their disclosure, they're obligated to disclose because they're a publicly traded company now. One of the risks is the advancement of quantum technology, quantum information science in general. Will it ever get to the point, so there's two issues, will it ever get matured to the point where it can break the standard encryption that is used now? Maybe, probably, eventually, but that's not going to happen without the safeguards also getting developed and matured. So with every technology, there's always that parallel opportunity where a technology is developed, but then it's safeguards are added in, built in, and matured along with it. And so I don't see it as, at least in anyone's lifetime in this room, where someone, and it'd have to be a nation state right now, because of the infrastructure required, would be able to crack standard encryption. And where I'm at with this is, if it ever gets to that point, your Bitcoin wallet getting hacked by a quantum computer is the least of your concerns. And so I know it's out there as a talking point and it should be, but no, I just don't see it as a showstopper to any of this getting mass adopted. It may even create more opportunity. And then on the mining in Texas, again, if I was from the South, I would say it blesses my heart that you mentioned Texas and energy. Whew. The talking points that came out, and I'll give you some background here. The Air Force sent me off to school again to get a master's degree in things about like climate, energy. It was energy focused because we care a lot about that. The regulatory framework, we litigate with utility companies regularly on the rates we're charged. the resilience of the energy grid. Decentralization is going to make the energy grid more stable. There are going to be companies, instead of the centralized, like what Thomas Edison created in Manhattan 120 years ago, is the same framework and operation we have right now. It's centralized heat source, mass distribution, a lot of single points of failure. It's kind of embarrassing. It's a regulated monopoly. And so the government, state governments, unless the energy's crossing state lines, governs internally how the energy grid exists. It's not decentralized. It's all stovepiped. They're starting to spin out, some states, the generation from the distribution, and that's been good. There's been a lot of progress. You could have a home builder create a community solar plant. That would make sense. You could have geothermal, if it makes sense, tidal energy. Wind is in its first generation. So the big propellers, you know, the DoD clearinghouse, anything above 500 feet, we got to say, and if it's a problem for our radars, our training areas. So we're involved in energy huge. What happened in Texas is because of inefficiency and lack of innovation, not because of Bitcoin mining. 100% guaranteed, prove me wrong. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency in general, could help reduce the energy cost by tokenizing things that should be penalized. So you kind of seen this with the green credits. And so a big polluting company will buy these credits from this other company. And I think that's how Tesla has been profitable. You know? So there's a lot of exchanging of that. So tokenization can help streamline that and make it more transparent. The other thing is with energy, compare what we use per household to what other houses use, you know, in Europe with a similar quality of life. So like my kid's Xbox, if I just walk by it, the power button comes on. It's, you know, just brush it. And so it's, they're not incentivized to be efficient machines that we purchase. And so our consumption of energy is because of some legacy technology, and there's not really incentive to innovate. So huge potential with tokenizing all of that to have a more sustainable use of energy on a daily basis. Totally sold on that idea, because other countries are doing it and it hasn't impacted their quality of life. So great questions though. What else? So the question is, how do you establish the value of the Bitcoin in the market right now? You know, it's like anything. How do you establish the value of another nation's fiat currency? It's based on trust, stability, gold. So that's the best equivalent to Bitcoin specifically. And then there are some, again, you can tokenize anything. So there are a lot of stable coins that are pegged to the value of something else. So a lot of them are pegged to the value of the US dollar within like very minimal fluctuation. Tether is the most popular one. The US dollar coin's another one. But the problem with these companies is crypto companies have developed a stable coin and people gave US dollars to the company and in exchange got the equivalent amount of Tether. What's backing that? What did that company do with the dollars? Did they lock it up in a vault? Of course not. You know, and so now audits have shown that Tether bought, like other companies do and banks do, commercial paper. Maybe the real estate was not worth the value of the commercial paper. Is it the Evergrande? Come on, some of you people know what I'm talking about. The Chinese real estate collapse could have impacted companies that bought that commercial paper. And so it could unravel and the value could rapidly decrease even though it's tethered to the US dollar. So again, lack of regulatory clarity, disparity in regulations. Tether is not a bank, and so they never really got audited and don't have to have the same reserves as a bank. It's not FDIC insured. So the value of Bitcoin is whatever people agree it is.
Yeah, I guess, but hear about the value changing
Yep.
considerably.
Because big players are getting involved, because if they can transact with it, they value it more. And if they think it's going to be used in the future and trusted, so it goes back to monetary theory. And I published an article, the Air Force published an article that I co-wrote with a guy last year that talked about this, how money, what is money? And there's some books out there. Bad Money is a book that I cite in the article about how people are starting to lose trust in the stability and value of the US dollar. And so it goes into inflationary theory and why do countries do this, long-term versus short-term policy goals. Bitcoin is best understood by understanding the value of gold. It's speculation, it's a store of value, a hedge against inflation if you think some other asset is going to decrease more than the one you're holding. That's all Bitcoin is right now. So we got a few minutes left. Yes?
First, I want to say you make a good case for nuclear. Nuclear
Say
power.
again?
I said first, you make a good case for nuclear power. This is what I've learned so far. I got a question.
$10 billion for a new nuclear plant.
Yeah.
So I think combined cycle natural gas is cheaper. But look at this. If you're into that, Lazards has a levelized cost of energy annually, and that'll tell you, I think, industry scale wind power and solar is probably going to beat nuclear. Well, and from the lab perspective, how do you get that workforce guaranteed, trained for the life cycle of that nuclear plant? And where do we put the waste right now? We store it locally because no state will accept the nuclear waste. I'm all for nuclear power if they can figure all that out. And it's the Navy's fault because the Navy is the ones that invested in fission technology instead of fusion technology. And so if it got matured if fusion got matured to the point where we didn't have all these, meltdown concerns, let's talk after. I've deep dived nuclear, but let's get to your cryptocurrency question.
So I got two questions. What do you think about the price of storing something on the blockchain? I think a gigabyte costs like $70,000. I don't know, something I read. I don't know how accurate that is now. And then I had another question with crypto. So right now with the stock market, clearinghouses and brokerages, they're running into an issue where it's a Y+2. And I think, the blockchain ledger would solve that immediately. Like there is no waiting for money to be deposited.
100% crypto, and there are companies doing this where anything can be tokenized. A corporate stock can be tokenized and traded 24/7. You need liquidity, so it won't be on the NASDAQ. So it can go year round. People will be able to, do they own the tokenized version of the actual stock? And then you get into voting rights. And so you need regulatory clarity for one framework, or else the centralized exchange that allows you to tokenize the currencies, they have all the voting rights because you don't own any stock. So it's a great idea. And I think the technology is there to improve it and make it a more level playing field. No one gets an advantage being closer to the transaction.
And what do you think about the cost of storing things on a blockchain? Do you
It's
ever see
ridiculous.
that going down? And
Yeah, so transaction fees are absolutely insane. Some blockchains are good, so like there are some that are, I don't think they're stable yet. So like Solana crashes, Binance has regulatory issues, but the Ethereum to transact on that, the normal person that wants to buy even, I'll put a couple $100 in this, or minting a non-fungible token. So I took a JPEG, I created an NFT and tried to sell it and no one bought it. but it costs something to put it on the blockchain, and that's too expensive to be useful right now. So I'm more sold on the internal use cases, you know, for transactions. And then gaming. You know what my kid does with the money I give him? He goes and buys Fortnite avatars. It doesn't even exist, but they're meaningful to him, and his friends think he's cool, and it gives him special powers in the game. And so like all of this is going to be amplified and applied to real life in the metaverse. That's what's going to happen.
But I got a question on that. NFTs, they're not stored necessarily on a blockchain. It's just like, you know, if you buy an NFT, a picture of something, it's a link to that picture right now because the cost of storing it on the blockchain is so expensive.
I'm
So,
not
like, your
sold
kid-
on NFTs unless
Yeah,
they are the in-game avatar that people
Exactly.
would pay a license to use.
yeah.
And the company that I mentioned doing the proof of view software, they're using that. They just signed an agreement with one of the large online video, the ad providers for authenticity. So that same technology will apply to authenticity of the NFT. And if it can be used in gaming for like monetization through a license to use it, then I think there's some really good value there. Yep, and it'll take some time to mature. So, great questions though. You read too much about this stuff. Me too. We can be friends. All right. I'm going to hang out here for the folks that are present. Thank you for attending. Hope you got something out of it. Appreciate it.